Good evening, everybody. This is the first episode ever of Three Deep with none other than Mike Wobschall, Joe Johnson, owner of Purple PTSD at VikingsTerritory.com, and every week we're actually going to have a rotating third guest host, hence the name. And this week it is the managing editor of Purple PTSD himself, Mr. DeShawn Vaughn. How you doing, Mr. DeShawn?
Oh, I'm great. Watching the Bears do terrible, which is no icing on the cake, really, for me.
Yeah, it doesn't elicit the same happiness that you get from the Packers losing. It's like seeing your ex-girlfriend's husband get hit by a car. Wobby, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good, fellas. I'm also watching this game here on a Thursday night as we record this podcast. Vikings Nation getting ready for their game on Sunday night. We're watching a primetime game here with the Bears. The Vikings playing primetime this week against the Seahawks. So the NFC North showcased a little bit this weekend. Of course, your Green Bay Packers, Joe, they're off this week, so they can't lose. Sorry, guys.
I told him about my lower back tattoo a little too early into this relationship. Wobby is our new, basically Vikings insider and also the editor of both PurplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com. So I just wanted to welcome you to the family, I guess, as you would call it, and I'm looking forward to covering the season with you, man. Even though it feels like I got everything finally in place in my crazy a beautiful mind shack of red yarn everywhere, and then the Vikings are just terrible. Once finally,
that's
place.
all right. That's all right. We got a lot of football left, and I'm very pleased to be joining you guys. I've seen how passionately and consistently you guys cover the Vikings, and I know a lot of people appreciate your coverage, so it's an honor to be a part of the team. I'm happy to be doing it. I'm doing 3 articles per week, as you guys know, but for the listeners, it's Monday after the game, it's Wednesday to preview the opponent, and it's Friday to get ready for the game, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. So thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about these Seahawks and Vikings.
I am too, and before we do that, I'm sure everyone's super excited for me to read some ad copy. Three Deep is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you with the best tools for your grooming experience. Go to manscaped.com and use the discount code 3DEEP, one word with the number 3, not spelled out 3, so 3DEEP. And you get 20% off your order, which is pretty cool, because when everyone sees me on the street, they always say that guy knows about hygiene. But yeah, let's get
Hey, I got some of that Manscaped product now. I got some, and I believe in it. I like it. People go out and find it. Go to the site, check it out. It's good stuff for sure. And look, I mean, you got to give them credit. Like, their product is something that is, a touchy subject, shall we say, for some people. And they just dive right in with that ad read. They just dove right in. They embrace it and they own it, and you can tell by the product because the product's really good.
Hands down the best YouTube ads I see ever. Usually I skip YouTube ads when Manscaped comes on. It's always something quirky and worth watching. Best YouTube ads I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, you got to lean hard into stuff like that. That's my philosophy. Speaking of leaning hard into things, how about before we get into the Seahawks, the rigmarole, I wanted to get your guys' take, since we haven't done this is the first episode, obviously, just to get a feel on where you are at with the team in general. Obviously, they won last weekend. The offense looked better the week before that, and they could have pulled out a victory there. I'll start with you, Wobby. I mean, how do you feel about this team in terms of the 2020 and the rest of the season as the team is comprised currently? I mean, I'm not looking for a record prediction, but what are your expectations based on what you've seen so far?
Well, the Vikings are not a playoff caliber team right now. The good news is the playoffs don't start right now, so that's okay. They are a team whose offense, I think, is ready. Once they start executing consistently, their offense is ready to be good enough to be in the playoffs. Their defense is, and I kind of wrote about this last week, their defense has gone full circle with Mike Zimmer. And when Zim took over in 2014, the defense was coming off statistically the worst season in Vikings history for a defense from 2013. Add some free agents, bring Mike Zimmer in here, and the thing started to turn around in 2015 and 2016, and then 2017 came, and it was one of the best defenses in Vikings history. Well, that core group, that window closed, and the Vikings had to sort of start to rebuild it. Fortunately, they were able to keep some key pieces like Harrison Smith and Kendricks and Barr and Hunter, but the vast majority of it has been turned over. We saw Trey Waynes go. We saw Linval go. We saw Captain Munnerlyn go. We saw Xavier Rhodes go. So Zimmer is turning this thing over, and it's the second go-around with Zim. Don't worry about it. It's not playoff time yet. Zim has the opportunity and the time to get the defense in shape. So I think for Vikings fans who are expecting to turn the season on and see a playoff team in week 1, those people are disappointed. For Vikings fans who have the patience to wait and see if this roster can develop over the course of a season, the jury's still out.
Yeah, and I'll kick this to you, DeShawn, too, but kind of a thing tied into that is there was a lot of fans disappointed with the news yesterday that Snacks Harrison was signed to the Seahawks practice squad because the floating idea as to why the Vikings didn't sign him was because he would cost too much, and apparently he really didn't. How do you interpret that non-move by the Vikings in terms of what we're talking about, like what the season, the trial by fire on defense? I mean, do you think they just said, why would we add a guy who's going to be 32 next month when it wouldn't make much sense, I guess, long term, even though in the short term, the thought is he'd have tremendous impact in the middle of the defensive line, right?
So yeah, I think what you said was long term, and I think long term the move for Snacks Harris doesn't really fit for the Vikings because they have Michael Pierce coming back, and I think once he comes back, he'll have that same kind of Snack Harrison impact. But you still have to evaluate your guys on the team. You can't always, when you have a deficit on the team, you can't always go out and grab guys to immediately replace them. You have to develop your talent, and with Michael Pierce opting out, we got a unique chance to really evaluate our depth. We got to move Shamar Stepp to nose tackle where he probably should be. We got to see Jaleel Johnson. We got to see Armon Watts in expanded roles. We're even seeing Jalen Holmes move from inside and outside. So really, while this season may not be the most successful season, it can either end up being one of the worst in recent memory. You're getting a good chance to really evaluate your guys. And when you look week in and week out, you see guys like Cameron Dantzler who's getting better. You see guys like Jeff Gladden, even though he's giving up big plays, you see him getting better on a snap-by-snap basis. Even DJ Wandham is getting some time, and that's really what this season should be about. It shouldn't. Sometimes you have seasons that's not going to be about making the playoffs. It's going to be about retooling your team so that maybe next season or the season after that, you can have that team that can go toe-to-toe with the Buccaneers or the Packers or the Saints of the world.
Yeah. I feel... Were you going to say something, Wobby?
Nope.
Oh. And that is the show for the week. I'm kidding. Yeah, I feel like, with the expanded wild card, like the expanded playoff format, that they could potentially, especially with the way things are looking in the NFC East, like they could scrap their way to a 7-9 record perhaps and make the playoffs. But it's really, what would the point of that really be? Maxing out whatever salary cap space they have left to get a worse draft pick next season, I guess. And I know that's not really how they think, but I think a lot of people just got caught up in some of the camp talk, myself included, with the team. They're not going to come out and say it's a rebuilding year, we're not going to be that great. They're always going to say something a little more optimistic. But I think a lot of people kind of got caught up into the idea that this was going to be an 11-5 or 12-4 team because Xavier Rhodes was bad last year, therefore any replacement would be better. And I never really understood that mindset when they went 10-6 with a lot of talent at every position on defense, and there was just a ton of turnover. And we know how long it takes the corners to acclimate to Zimmer's system. So the one thing that does bother me a little bit, though, in that regard is the continued lack of investment in the interior of the offensive line. And there's a couple things I wanted to touch on there. First of all, Wobby, you obviously have a different perspective than anyone we've worked with before as an insider, Vikings insider, period, also working with the team. But, I mean, what do you think is the philosophy or the thinking? When I do Morning Joes with Joe Oberle, he always tells me when I get all worked up that the team obviously has more information than I do, and they have a plan. And sometimes it feels like they don't. It's just like, draft a tackle, move him to guard, and then maybe get a guard in the 7th round, and keep shuffling guys around. That clearly hasn't worked very well, and so I'm just wondering, like, I've been pining for them to bring Josh Klein back. I don't understand why they wouldn't do that outside of the same logic as the Snacks Harrison thing. But just what your take is on the line in general, the philosophy there, and if there's any sort of silver lining to what's been happening.
Well, they have a good position coach in Rick Dennison, and they have a good running back. And so when you've got those two things in place, you can sometimes fall into the trap or the thinking that, hey, let's get these guys together. They can develop some synergy, and the sum can be greater than the individual parts, and you can go down that road, and sometimes it can work. But not all the time will it work. And if it doesn't work, well, then you're sunk. And unfortunately, that's where the Vikings have found themselves in some of these seasons lately. Thinking about 2016 when they started off hot and the offensive line got injured and let them down. And so, I think it's a lack of investment early in the draft, although they did take Bradbury in the 1st round and O'Neal in the 2nd round. But those two guys are good. What do you know? You took guys early in the draft and they're good. I mean, that's usually how it works. I think they need one or two more. I think they are talent deficient along the offensive line, and I think the coaching is good. I think the scheme is good. I just don't think they have enough talent up front. Now, that's not the only thing you need. You need toughness, you need smart guys, and you need guys who can work together. You don't need talent for any of that. But there's just not enough talent there, and too often I think they're mismatched when they look across the line of scrimmage at the other defensive line.
And I know, DeShawn, when the draft was happening, we did like a 5-hour long live draft reaction video thing, and you and Kirby, who's the other editor of our network, were really enamored with the pick of Ezra Cleveland, and it just seems very. I keep banging my head against the wall, like reading some of the things that Kubiak was saying about moving Cleveland to guard for reps and how he feels he keeps defaulting to what he knows and we have to break him of that. And it's like, well, he's defaulting to what he knows, which is because he's a tackle who's never played guard. Why would you deprogram that and then maybe screw up and TJ Clemmings him? He's not a guard. He's never played guard. Why would you do that? And so I wanted kind of your take on that decision, and then also I know you had a couple stats about Samia and O'Neal as well.
Oh, yeah, so when I actually did like a personal scouting report on Ezra Cleveland, and what I saw was someone who lacked strength but had an elite understanding of zone blocking. So the idea is with tackles is that guard is kind of the easier position, also the less valued. So if you can't make it at tackle, you're kind of expected to be able to kick it inside to guard and be better. So, I mean, I still seen Ezra Cleveland as a guard because he had the athletic body type. He was able to get out in space. But I'm not sure if he would struggle at guard. But given what we have in front of him, of course, Samia has been bad. He's like PFF's worst graded right guard, but he's been getting better. And like you said, from the Texans game, he and Brian O'Neill combined to stop J.J. Watt for 0 pressures, which is insane, knowing that J.J. Watt is like one of the best football players in the entire league. And J.J., he lined over top of Samia quite a bit also. Yeah. While he spent his majority over O'Neill, he took his shots at Samia because he's our worst lineman. I mean, that's what you do with your best player. You put him in the best mismatch. And I think Samia ended up giving up a sack. It wasn't to Watts, but he improved. And that's just what you want to see. I mean, with offensive linemen, it's not always going to be immediate. Not everybody can be like Ryan Ramczyk. Sometimes it takes a couple of years with guys, and all you really want to see is improvement. And that's what we've kind of started to see with Samia. We'll have to see if he can build on that. Same with Dakota Dozier. Last year, Dakota Dozier played 7 games with 30 or more snaps, and in those 7 games, he gave up 18 pressures. As of right now, he's going into his 5th game, and he's giving up about half the pressures. So these guys are progressing, whether it be slowly or not. And that could be the reason why we haven't seen Cleveland yet. Another thing I kind of want to touch on, the coaching staff, because their message for Cleveland wasn't really congruent. I know we saw Spielman say that he thought we'd see Samia soon. And then we heard Kubiak say that they're treating him just like they did with Samia. And some guys were like, why would you do that? Samia's not good. And so who knows when we'll see Cleveland. But I think the silver lining to it all is that Dozier is playing better. He has his gaffes, like against the Titans game where he kind of left Bradbury on an island. He got killed by Simmons. Yeah. But these guys are getting better every week. And maybe, who knows, by week 8 or week 9, we could have an average unit, which is all we ask for, honestly, is to have.
I would be. Ooh, I sound like the Wizard of Oz. I would be incredibly happy if we just had a decent line. I mean, I know the knock on Cousins is that he needs everything around him to be perfect to essentially move the chains, which I don't think is necessarily a fair assessment because things haven't been perfect, and he's done some things statistically that I think that outside of his paycheck, a lot of people would have begged for. That I'm 36 years old. I've never had a franchise quarterback that was not, Warren Moonish and, going gray and everything. And so I think that I don't know. I guess I come off as a little bit of a Cousins defender because I was really into the idea of the Vikings getting him. I also thought when they would get him that they would protect him more. But I think we've seen as kind of a blueprint as to how this offense can become elite. I mean, last year there was a stretch of games where Cousins was on par with Patrick Mahomes' 2018 season almost identically statistically for a long stretch of games, not just 2 or 3 games. And so I think that he deserves a little bit, not credit, but less heat for what's been going on. And I think that, when you look at Justin Jefferson, DeShawn, how angry I was about that pick. And I wrote about it a lot, and I did say I hope to be wrong, and I'm very happy to say that I do believe I am wrong about the kid. And it's a rare thing. I mean, what do you guys think, Wobby, it makes him good, or let's say even better, what makes him different than Diggs, do you think, in what he does and the fit that he brings to the team?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think Jefferson has the potential to be the type of player for the offense that Diggs was, which is explosive, a guy who can explode. And Thielen can explode too. It's not that Thielen can't, but Diggs did it more often the last 2 seasons. He was the explosive guy. So I think Jefferson could do that. And Jefferson is in a great situation because he's got physical ability and traits. And now he's got a great teacher in Adam Thielen, who's going to teach him about route running and separation and suddenness and all the things that you want to teach a young player about being a pro and about winning one-on-one battles, because that's what Adam Thielen does. No matter who's guarding him, he creates separation. And it's because he knows how to play the position. So Justin Jefferson is in a really good situation. Let's not forget, though, that if we start comparing Jefferson to Diggs and start saying that Jefferson is doing what Diggs did, we're shortchanging what Diggs did for like 4 seasons. I mean, Stephon Diggs. If Jefferson has Diggs numbers for the next 4 years, that will be a wild success.
Yeah,
I mean, Diggs was really good. Jefferson is not there yet, but he's just showing us that he has a chance to get there.
Yeah, I mean, how often do you see an NFL trade that actually works out for both sides? It would be very, very strange. But yeah, I'll kick the same question to you, DeShawn. Wobby, you sounds a lot like the Chris Carter, Randy Moss situation. But yeah, I know that you at the time of the draft, you and I kind of were like, it seemed like a reach, and then we differed on our paths as to the fit that he brought to this offense. I was just more worried about his ability to deal with press coverage in the NFL since he was running free a lot off the line at LSU, but it seems to really not have been a problem.
Yeah, so I mean, during the draft, I think I was so just like kind of O-line blind that I had like my heart set on Cesar Ruiz, who's been doing good, by the way. I don't think I've ever like questioned like Justin Jefferson's ability to be good. I think I just kind of questioned his presence that'll make us win. But Justin Jefferson has been everything we wanted him to be and more. Like, I think I saw a stat to where he's like number 1 or number 2 in the league in press man like coverage beaters or something crazy like that. Yeah. So he's been everything we want and more. And if we can just get him the ball more, and then he's just been like extremely efficient. And that was the thing with Diggs. Diggs didn't need 130, 140 targets to be great. And that's what we're seeing with Jefferson. I think Jefferson only has like 20, maybe 25 targets. He's averaging like, I mean, of course he didn't start his first 2 games, but he's averaging like 4 or 5 targets a game, and he has like 340 something yards. Yeah. So, 25 yards, and he's averaging right 20, like 21, 22 yards a catch. So and that's important for a rookie, is that he is being extremely efficient when we get the ball in his hands. He's making big things happen. Takes a lot of pressure off of Cousins. If we can just get Cousins to trust him, because when I watched the Texans, when I rewatched the tape for the Texans game, there were times where it looked like Jefferson was open, but it would have been a tight window throw, and Kirk didn't make the throw. So we're still working. They're still working. Of course, they didn't have the offseason, and that contributes to it. They're still working on that trust to allow Jefferson to be Max Jefferson, for him to be the best that he can be, because one of the best things about Justin Jefferson coming out of college was his body control, his strong hands, and his ability to catch in traffic. Now, we saw that on the third down play when he kind of went over top of the defender and kind of just grabbed it with strong hands, and the ball like didn't move at all. So I think as the season goes on and Kirk starts to trust Jefferson more, we're only going to see him get better. Like, this is only his second start. Like, he's already, like, kind of, like, wowing people in just his second start. And to imagine that he is only going to get better from here on out is kind of crazy. So when people start to say, like, the rookie, like, the reminiscences of rookie Randy Moss or Reggie Wayne, it's not overstated. I mean, of course, nobody's ever going to be Moss again, but this kid's good. He's, like, really good.
Yeah, it's a welcome surprise. I just, I got my blindness as well as just the history of Spielman drafting SEC receivers in the first or second round, and how none of those have made it beyond their rookie contract. But it's not hard to kind of get excited about how the offense looks and the balance that they have now with Dalvin Cook. And I want to start kind of there when we look at the Seattle game, because there seems, I want your guys' take on how good you think Seattle is, because the teams they've beaten have a combined 4-12 record. Everyone points to this big matchup of Dalvin Cook being the third leading rusher versus the third rushing defense, but the Seahawks defense is the most passed against defense in the entire NFL. They don't, people don't run the ball at them a lot because they have to play catch up, because Russell Wilson has 3 receivers that are just balling out like crazy. So, I think that they are obviously a good team, but I don't think that maybe they're as all powerful as people are saying that they are.
Yeah, I can see that, Joe. I totally see where you're going there, and that run defense needs to be tested, and the Vikings should test it. If they don't, they're making a mistake, and I've been vocal about that in the first month of the season. You need to go to Dalvin Cook even more than they have in the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks it's been better, but he's the best player on your team, or at least the hardest player to tackle on your team, and you got to make the other defense tackle him. And if you don't, you're making the other defense's life easier. Let's test the Seahawks defense And let's see if they really are good against the run, which the numbers say they are, or if they're not. You're right. They're the most passed against defense in the NFL, which would help their total rushing yards number, but they're also giving up like under 4 yards per carry. So on a per carry basis, which is a fair metric, it's very good. Poona Ford can be a problem. So if he's in the game and he's playing and he's going against the Vikings interior offensive line, he's a problem. He's a penetrator. He can 2-gap, he can 1-gap, he can penetrate, and he can make plays behind the line of scrimmage. So you got to take care of him and test this Seattle run defense.
Yeah, DeShawn, what are your thoughts on that? And also, there's a lot of people that aren't too happy about how the Vikings have used Dalvin in the pass game, or the lack of his usage in the pass game. Dustin Baker, who writes for us as one of our senior writers for Vikings territory, has written about that a few times this week. He also wrote about look at Cordero Patterson actually doing something. That the Vikings now are struggling to find a third wide receiver behind Jefferson and Thielen, and that should be Dalvin Cook. And there's just people not understanding why he's not getting more balls that way. But what are your thoughts like on the Seahawks defense and also integrating Dalvin into the passing game more?
So I'm glad that Wobby touched on like Jaron Reed and Poona Ford. The Seahawks do such a good job of finding like these under the radar guys who are just really good at run defense. They've been doing it for a long time. So they have like there's Poona Ford, there's Alton Robinson, like a 3rd-round pick. There's Anthony Rush. There's like 4 or 5 guys that play on the interior. They're just really good at run defense. So in my opinion, I don't think this is going to be Dalvin's game. I think this is the game where, like you said, we should maybe get Dalvin on the edges, run the screen passes, even though the screen passes haven't worked well for us. We should try to establish those. So when a team is good at run defense, what it tells me is that on early downs they're extra aggressive. They're moving the line of scrimmage. They're coming at you fast and hard. So I think this is the game where we see Kubiak really get deep into his playbook with the play action passing, and we get this defense to be undisciplined and not trust their eyes. So I use Dalvin as a decoy to get Kirk and Thielen and Jefferson really going. And then once this defense kind of is back on their heels, you wear him down with Dalvin Cook. And he'll still get his, 20, 25 carries a game. But if you come out kind of unbalanced first, and then the pass rush for the Seahawks isn't great. I think they're a worse rated pass rush than us. So I think if you can block these guys and get this play action going early, I think you'll find a lot of success with Dalvin Cook on the ground. Now, the only other issue is trying not to, match Russell Wilson in points.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I think the over-under is like 60 points at this point. But they have a lot of injuries in their defense and their secondary. Bruce Irvin's out. Jamal Adams isn't playing, I don't think.
Adams is a big one. Adams is a really big one.
That was a big trade for them. I'm happy about that. So I mean, they might end up being a shootout for the Vikings. And I think they would have a decent chance if not for. Well, before I talk about when the Seahawks had the ball, and I apologize because this wasn't on the agenda, but I want your guys' takes on the lack of usage that we've seen from Irv Smith Jr. A lot of people were touting him as this breakout superstar this season, and everyone kind of, I think, doesn't understand the 2 tight end system that Kubiak runs, and that doesn't necessarily mean he's throwing the ball to 2 tight ends consistently. Because if you look at the history of it, he runs a lot of 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets, but he doesn't have 2 tight ends that get a significant amount of balls thrown their way. But where has he been, especially in terms of looking for a third guy to get the ball to through the air?
So they've tried. I've seen it on film. So last week Kubiak actually ran a really interesting clear out concept for Irv Smith where he had a motion. He had Jefferson kind of run a go route and Smith kind of curled up under him, and it was wide open, but the offensive line couldn't hold up enough for us to get the ball to him. And then in the Colts game where we kind of hit Irv Smith on the seam route, but he wasn't able to hang on to the ball. So his chances are coming very sparingly.
Yeah, I think the better the running game is, the more chances Irv's gonna have because of what DeShawn is saying. I think a lot of Irv's chances are gonna come off of bootlegs and leak routes and where he's run blocking for a count or two, then he's coming off. If you look at his Alabama tape, Nick Saban and those guys ran so many plays like that for him. So I like Irv. I think he's got ability. But he's like one of the youngest players in the NFL. We got to remember that, and he's playing behind a guy who never comes off the field, Kyle Rudolph. So I think patience is key with Irv.
Yeah. Um, Looking at when the Seahawks have the ball, the clear and present danger. Ooh, what a cool current analogy. They obviously have Russell Wilson, who's having an MVP type season. They have three wide receivers who are lethal. I mean, their stats are just crazy. Uh, I think Metcalf is first in the league in yards with like over 400. He's also averaging over 25 yards a catch, a la Justin Jefferson. Tyler Lockett is third in the league with 4 touchdowns, and then David Moore is averaging over 17 yards a catch as well. Is there anything that you guys saw maybe last week against the Texans to make you think there's a way the Vikings can mitigate that air attack, DeShawn?
So unfortunately, I think the key is for the defensive line to stay disciplined and not allow Russell Wilson to just kind of play backyard football. And because these guys, they're young, and it's going to be really hard to cover guys like Metcalf and Lockett forever because they are so good at improvising and just kind of making stuff up on the go. And that's just not something you want your young corners to really be dealing with. So we struggled so much with pass rush. We're kind of going against a weaker pass blocking team, and Ngakoue is kind of getting his stride. Ifadio Denebo has recorded 5 pressures in back-to-back games, so hopefully we can finally get a week where we can make Russell Wilson feel rushed and not let him sit in the pocket, not let him create extra. And I think these guys will do better because if you just leave these guys out on an island and you got Russell Wilson running around back there, you're going to give up a lot of big plays. So the key is Zim's going to have to get creative with some of his blitzes, and the defensive line is just going to have to perform better.
Yeah, I think this offense is a handful. I don't think it's a lost cause at all. It's not where I'm trying to go with this. I just think it's a handful, guys. And, the obvious thing is you can't let Chris Carson go off because if that happens, then you have no chance. But what I think it's going to come down to is there's going to be like 3 or 4 times. That's it. Like Seattle's going to run 60 plays. Okay. There's going to be 3 or 4 where Russell Wilson might do something to give you a chance to take the ball, and you got to do it like 2 or 3 of those 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're going to lose. And if you do, you're going to have a chance to win.
Yeah, the scary thing about Wilson is that he's done a lot of so he's first in the league in touchdowns, right? Passing touchdowns with 16. I think he's third in overall yards with over 1,200, and he's 17th in passing attempts, right? So that means that he's been incredibly efficient, 103 pass attempts. And so I look at that and then I extrapolate that out and look at what if it's the time of possession situation the Vikings saw themselves in the first 2 weeks of the season. That could be a nightmare. And it's going to come down to Chris Carson, and he's been banged up, and but it's hard to really even get frustrated about some of the things on defense because there's been a lot of there's youth, there's inexperience, but there's also been a ton of injuries that hurt this defense tremendously. Start season they had 2 elite guys at basically every level of the defense, and now 2 of those guys are gone. Ngakoue, I think we should. I want your guys' takes on how he's performed thus far. It's a little underwhelming just because he wasn't in game shape. He had been anywhere near the Jacksonville facility for a long time, and he came in and started out slow. But the idea of him and Danielle Hunter was just everyone got so frothy about it. It just it obviously isn't going to happen until next year. But it's at the same time, he seems to be getting better with each passing week.
I think without Danielle Hunter, I think Ngakoue is just lunch pail workman-like, solid, can rely on him, nothing splashy, might pop up here and there. So, and I think that's what he is. And I think they made that trade. My guess, and I don't know this, my guess is they made that trade when they knew Hunter wasn't coming back.
For sure.
I don't think they were like, hey, let's give Danielle Hunter a bookend and let's just get a guy who's going to dominate one-on-ones. No, I think they were like, oh crap, we're 99 ain't playing this year. We got to get somebody. So you're right. Next year we're going to, you're going to see that, and then I think you're going to have Ngakoue with a bunch of one-on-ones, and you might see him pop a little bit. But right now, I think he's just like, steady Eddie, workman-like lunch pail guy. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think that's his value to the defense.
What do you think, Mr.
Vaughn? So he's kind of, before he came over here, he saw one of his tweets where he was like, more run defense snaps equals kind of less opportunity. So he's kind of going through the same thing he was in Jacksonville, to where teams were kind of running on us a lot. He's getting less opportunities. I think he only has like 10 pressures on the season, but he has 4 sacks. So, like Wobby said, he's popping up here and there. I know he has 2 strip sacks. He's kind of popping up here and there. He's making a play. And I think, it's good, and it's good for us. But without somebody else, like I said, if Fido Denebo has 12 pressures, but his impact hasn't been on the level where we probably want it to be, and we're not really getting any interior pressure. So there isn't like a consistent impact from the defensive line, and it just kind of makes the whole Ngakoue trade seem less than what it is. Because if Danielle Hunter was playing, Ngakoue probably would have more pressures. He might even have more than 4 sacks. But he's been doing good despite his circumstances. But he might get better as the season goes on, because like you said, he didn't have a camp because he stayed away from the Jaguars for so long, and he had practiced for like 2 days before he went out and played the Packers. So
yeah,
he's getting better. You see him kind of get faster off the line. He's getting his strip sacks. He has 2 already. So I think we'll see him get better. I honestly, like you said, I don't think we'll see Danielle Hunter. We'll have to rely on Odenigbo and Nwanem to maybe try to get better. Maybe we'll see some James Lynch on the inside, because the interior guys haven't really. But we'll see what they try to do to get this pass rush going.
Yeah, it's hard not to get a little excited for next season, as long as they draft a guard, for the love of God. But there's a lot of positives. There's a lot of question marks as well. But that defensive line, I keep checking whether or not people can opt back in from opting out for COVID, because it's like, Michael Pierce, man, where are you? But we shall see. To end the show, it could be a fun tradition. Who knows? Let's just not necessarily do a score prediction, but your thoughts on the Vikings and the Seahawks, and who's gonna win and why.
Yeah, I think I think it's going to come down to protecting Kirk Cousins, because Russell Wilson and these Seahawks, they're going to score. And it's not an indictment on the Vikings defense. It's just that's who they are. They're at home. They're comfortable. It's prime time. It's Russell Wilson. He's on a roll. So Seahawks going to put up points. And so for the Vikings to put up points, they can run it with Dalvin Cook, and that's great. But at some point you got to explode through the air, which the Vikings have been doing. So it's going to come down to pass protection. No Bruce Irvin is a big deal in this game. If the Vikings offensive line gives up, 2 sacks or maybe 3, they're going to be fine. And this is going to be a high scoring, fun shootout on Sunday Night Football. But if Kirk Cousins is running around and is pressured, it's going to be a long night for the Vikings.
What do you think, DeShawn?
So I think it depends on the game plan. So I tweeted out earlier that if the Vikings come out aggressive, that I think they have a chance in this game. The one thing we don't want is for them to kind of try to go to Dalvin or try to, eat clock, and they get 2 quick 3 and outs and they're already down 10-0 or 14-0. Like, that's kind of what we don't want.
Agreed.
But if they can come out aggressive and efficient and put up points and force the Seahawks to maybe not run the ball, maybe force the ball into Russell Wilson's hands, which, hasn't been going great for everybody, but it gives you more chances at maybe a turnover. But if we can force the Seahawks to maybe play our game and we not fall into their trap, I think we have a chance. Score prediction wise, I think it's going to be a big one. I say like 35, 38, something like that.
Yeah, I honestly think the over-under should be in the 80s. I could see the Seahawks easily putting up 40, 45 points or more. It's going to come down to me also, like you guys said, pressure on Wilson, but also turnovers. I think the Seahawks defense is relatively good in that regard, at getting turnovers. And so if the Vikings can hang on to the ball, and continue some of the success they've had. The first drive that they've had, even in the first 2 weeks when things were an unmitigated disaster, those first like scripted drives were successful. So I think if they just build on some of the stuff that we saw last week and they don't revert to being passive, that extends to the defense as well. I think they need to dial up some blitzes and some really aggressive plays on defense, because there's no way that these young guys are going to be able to keep up with those 3 receivers. I think the Vikings will give them a decent run for their money. I think who knows if they'll get a score or 2 in garbage time, but I could see the Seahawks are going to win, but it's probably going to be something like, let's say 41 to 30, in that range, something like that. But
if we can come out and make it entertaining and make it competitive, I'm happy. Win or lose, I just don't want another Colts game or Packers game.
Yeah.
If we can come out and hit our stride, make it competitive, make Wilson play. Win or lose, I'm completely happy.
Imagine if they beat them though. What if they blow them out? That would change. That would change everything.
That would set Vikings Twitter on fire.
Wouldn't it? I'd be like, we gotta hit up that practice squad. Get some of
we wouldn't
stats.
know what to do with ourselves, man. It'd be a crazy week.
Yeah, it would be. That's a world I someday want to live in. And so that is going to be the first episode of 3 Deep. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I also want to remind you that if you want to smell like a 36-year-old guy who was single for 5 years, check out manscaped.com. They have all sorts of cool stuff. They actually hooked us up pretty fat with a box full of all of the, well, at least some of their offerings, and they have really high quality stuff across the board, and it's affordable. They give me a bunch of statistics about the RPMs of their ball shaver, which I think you would want. I don't want that much power. I don't know. That's just me. It's like things can go wrong very quickly for me. But yeah, thanks you guys for stopping by. You can check out 3 Deep every week on Wednesday nights, and we're going to essentially have a rotating third guest. I want to thank you, DeShawn, for stopping by, and you'll be back probably in a couple weeks here, and we'll just go from there. But go to manscaped.com, use the discount code 3DEEP, the number 3, the word deep, one word, and we will catch you guys next week.
Happy manscaping.
See y'all.